Welcome to our podcast, Our Story to Tell, where we share the behind the scenes of moving our family abroad and how that has changed everything for us.
We're Rissa and Tanner, an American family living abroad with our two little adventurers. From the US to Germany, Japan, and now Italy, we're sharing the real, messy, and beautiful parts of living abroad.
We're not just storytelling travelers. This podcast is about transformation and unpacking what it takes to leave behind certainty and choose for curiosity instead.
We found that some of the most meaningful conversations happen in the in-between, in the messy middle of figuring things out, and that's what this podcast is about. It's not a guidebook, it's not a place to find advice, it's a story. It's our story. And maybe parts of it will sound a little bit like yours too. So, let's get started.
So this first episode, we wanted to kick off by just introducing us a little bit, by sharing more context of like who we are, why we're sharing our story now. Different than our YouTube channel and what that like really means for us, what has changed in our life to get us to this point.
Yeah, so here we are, episode 1, and I feel like this is a big moment because we actually never had in our plans to start a podcast.
No, we have been tossing this idea around for quite some time, right?
Yeah, honestly, we've been mulling over it for like 6 months, and I feel like previously it started off with an idea, but it never really felt right until now. So that leads us to the question, what is this podcast about? A little bit of everything. Based on our YouTube channel, I assume a lot of people are going to think it's about travel, and that is correct. We're going to be sharing what it's like to parent abroad, what it's like to handle the logistics of like scheduling a dentist appointment or a doctor appointment in a completely new language. We're going to be talking about funny expat fails, what it's like to adjust to new cultures, and so much more.
As we've mentioned a few times, we have a young family, and that comes with unique challenges moving abroad, learning a new language, raising them away from grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles. So we're going to be talking in a little bit of depth about how our kids have been adapting, really what we've learned from them, and to show like how resilient they are, but also to talk about the real struggles that come with it as well.
The difference between our channel and other podcasters is that we're not only going to be talking about travel and like all of the logistics that we just mentioned. One other thing we're going to be talking a lot about is what happens inside of you when you make a big move like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Part of the biggest changes that we've experienced has not been by like the number of countries we visited or like the unique foods that we've tasted. Really, it's been the internal change, like you said. And we're going to be sharing a little bit more about that, especially to include more of our background within our faiths, our beliefs, and just really like who we have been and like who we're becoming.
So whether you're thinking about moving abroad, questioning old beliefs, or honestly just here for a good story, you've come to the right place. And we are so happy you're here.
All right, so let's rewind a little bit. Both of us grew up in northern Utah. Well, you moved to Utah when you were about 12, living in southern Idaho. We both grew up in a small farming community, very conservative, in northern Utah, and that's where we met. I saw you first, but we won't go into that one on this episode.
Not yet.
That was like kind of the start of our journey of us was meeting at a really young age. And, you know, eventually flash forwarding, we became really good friends, eventually started dating. I served a church mission for a few years. We'll get more into those details another time, but
we are like zooming past a lot of our story right there. But to set the stage a little bit more, think about Utah. If you've never been, picture like beautiful mountains. It's a desert though. You have 4 seasons. Utah was a good place for us to grow up, but we've changed a lot since then. And one thing particularly that Utah is known for is having the Mormon religion in it. And we grew up in it. Our faith shaped us completely. It was a huge part in our community. It was a huge part in our activities, like youth activities, weekly Sunday meetings. Yeah, all of it.
And honestly, everyone's path was pretty much the same. It was do well in school, make sure you attend church, and for the guys, go on a mission. Eventually the girls could choose, and then eventually was get married and have kids and like stay on that path. And so like so many others, we got married really young. As far as standards go, I was 20, you were 19.
Check, check, check. We accomplished those boxes so fast.
So here we are in our early 20s, and we had accomplished so many of the checklists, if you want to say that. And it was just basically like build the family and raise kids at that point.
But before we had kids, like Tanner said, we got married young and then we went to university. We, graduated with our bachelor's. And during that time, actually soon after we got married, we went on our first international trip to Belize. And that was a really pivotal moment for us. It especially kicked off the travel bug in me. And I spent the next 2 years trying to convince Tanner of this year-long travel backpacking trip. He took a little convincing.
I took a lot of convincing. I was very much of the idea that we go traditional US vacations where you go for 2 weeks max to a place, you go and enjoy it, you have a really good time, and then you get back to work because that's what we were used to. That's what we saw. And it wasn't until I started seeing other people, I guess maybe post about it and just talk about it, and you get to know other people when you travel. As she mentioned, went to Belize, and I lived in Central America for the 2 years of my mission. And I just think as you get talking with more people, it just starts to get that curiosity. It did plant a little bug for me as well, but it definitely grew over time, like you said, until we both graduated and we decided to take several months to go and travel Southeast Asia backpack style. But how long did I agree to at first?
Well, I think it was 2 months,
I think
but
it was
we
2.
didn't have a return ticket home. So that was kind of the agreement that we had. We're leaving and we have flights booked for about 2 months out. And then after that, if Tanner wanted to go home, we would talk about that and decide. So this was really just such a pivotal moment in our lives because we just graduated, we have no kids, we've decided to wait to step into our careers, and we understand that most people don't even have that luxury to do. And we had saved up a lot. We had worked hard for this. It was a lot of planning in between. Also, when we were in college, we created a nonprofit, and the beginning of this backpacking trip was the volunteer trip, the first 2 weeks. So, of course, we'll explain all of this in maybe even the next episode. But this kind of paints the picture for you guys of, our journey up into, I guess, pre-kids, pre-life abroad, pre-careers. We were
Yes.
living.
We were definitely living. And like Rissa said, we definitely recognize the advantage that we had growing up in the community that we had, being able to apply and be eligible for scholarships, getting married young, check Pell Grants, FAFSA. It definitely helped us. And for those European listeners, FAFSA is like the federal aid for student something. Anyway, it's basically a Pell Grant from the government to help subsidize schooling. And so we definitely recognize that that's not available to everybody. And we took full advantage of it. And we're happy that we were able to. Yeah, just to put that record out there, we've worked hard for what we have earned, but we've also had a lot of benefit for us. And then moving forward from that switch really flipped for us. And it just continued to grow and grow. We ended up spending almost 6 months backpacking until it got closer to Christmas time. We decided to go home with family. We got home from that trip, spent a few weeks, and we were dying to go out again. But during this whole time, we had conversations about what life would look like. And we initially talked about maybe 1 to 2 times a year doing an international trip. And we wanted to prioritize that. But that wasn't enough for you, right? You kind of had some.
At this time, you guys, I was literally trying to persuade Tanner to become an ambassador or something that would move us abroad. I knew we needed to make money. It was time to step into our careers. We knew that was the path for us, but how in the heck could we make it be abroad?
So then flash forward, I started my first big boy job, if you want to say, a few months after we got back from the trip, and it was really great. Had really great opportunities, advanced quite well. So at some point I found out that there were international jobs at work, and I immediately signed up for job notifications, and we started getting a lot of notifications over time. And we just basically started applying to anything. We were pretty content with just anything that popped up. Coincidentally, within just a few short weeks, there were a few job applications I applied for, and I got interviews for, and I got offers for. It was a really great time, honestly. It was a great boost of confidence. It really set ourselves up for the ultimate choices. The first one was in UK at Lakenheath. The second one was Okinawa, Japan. And then the third one was Grafenwehr in Germany. And obviously by our YouTube channel, you guys know that we definitely took Germany, and we absolutely loved our time there. And so let's kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that prior to the move, we had zero questions about moving. And we'd literally never been to Germany. That's like kind of a funny part when I look back, is like we were so naive, honestly.
Yeah.
But we were so excited, so gung-ho about this opportunity to live abroad. Having backpacked, we knew that it would shape us because our backpacking trip just completely shaped us and gave us so many new perspectives. And that's what we wanted. I feel like there's a theme in a lot of our stories, and that it is that the uncomfortable situations lead to growth. We've really leaned into that, and that's what we decided to do is let's go to Germany. It's a central location. There's so many opportunities for travel. It's a new place. And also, it was during COVID.
Which also added to a lot of the stress in navigating like the logistics getting there. With the moves with military, because I am a civilian employee, I am treated very similar to like an active duty family would be, or an active duty, member.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you there. I don't even know if we stated that you were a US government employee, but it's probably important to just like clear that up in case if you are new here. We are an American family, and Tanner does work for the US government. He started in Utah, and as we're sharing this story, this is how we got abroad, through the job with the US government.
Yeah, that's a good clarification to make from the first point. But logistically, it was still very confusing and complicated during COVID. So we had to figure out a lot of different new experiences on top of added security measures for COVID, including 2 quite expensive COVID tests. They were $399 each, and they had to be done at one location that would get them back within 48 hours, like the results, because our flights had to have them within 72 hours. We had to provide a negative COVID test within 72 hours of departure. So that became a little bit more logistically challenging, and we also had a 15-month, 13, 14-month old at the time. So our oldest was really young, which was easier to move because she just, was our little sidekick at the time, but also added to a little complexity.
Gosh, but let's talk about getting into Germany. So we did this long flight with her, which was basically an empty plane because it was COVID, which was very nice. We could lay out. However, she was walking all over. But I just remember like flying down into Germany and seeing the green, which was weird to me because we were used to desert Utah in the winter or early spring. This is in March. And it's gray there. And here in Germany was still pretty green. And I remember getting off the plane. We landed in Frankfurt. We were sleeping in the car. Your nice coworker picked us up. And then we were in quarantine for about 2 weeks. So I remember like the first moment we went to a supermarket after quarantine and just like looking around, not recognizing like a fourth of the food there, and being so impressed that eggs were not in the refrigerator. It was just such a fun and big culture shock.
And we had experienced little bits of European shopping and stuff. We had done a trip in 2017 to Italy and Switzerland. But I think your mind is in a different mindset, right? When you are a traveler or a tourist, you're in and out, you're exploring and still like gathering these like little pieces of information. But when you're like, this is my hometown, or this is my, not hometown, this is my neighborhood now, this is where I'm going to be shopping and living, it kind of throws you in for a loop a little bit.
Yeah, everything you're looking around is like, okay, this is what I need to get used to. And yeah, this is the new normal. To keep it short, Germany was such a beautiful time for us. We grew so incredibly much. And I feel like it's the moment where we really started to think for ourselves. We started to talk more about politics, societal normals, parenting, like just a lot of the big conversations and things that really make couples like work together.
I think what you're trying to get at is the unique parts of society that you have to like accommodate to, or not accommodate to, you have to adjust to, because it's different than what you were raised in, different than what we were used to. So we're asking questions about healthcare, we're asking questions about politics, we're asking questions about like schools, because there are unique differences between each of them. And that just gets the curiosity bug going. And it really did. And it took off. And so many people on our YouTube channel have reached out to us, have shared tiny bits of information. So we've gotten like little spark notes of German history during this time. And it really opened up a lot of that curiosity, like I mentioned. where we wanted to learn more. Where Rissa said before, we wanted to lean into like that uncertainty, into that like uncomfortable settings so that we could grow. And that's exactly what we did for nearly 3 years there. We lived, loved it, and grew, and really saw our time in Germany as one of the most pivotal times in like our journey of becoming who we are and who we hope to become in the future.
Yes, there was just so much growth that after, 2.5 years of living there, we thought to ourselves, Willa is still really young. We, at this time, had also another little baby, Noah, our other adventurer. She was about, a couple months old. And we just thought, while our kids are young, let's explore more of the world. Like, let's be honest. It was kind of me at first that was like feeling an itch to just, I don't know, experience more of life. I loved Germany, and the thought of leaving Germany was difficult. And we just grew so much that I thought, why stop there?
I agree. I think it was hard for me to understand where you were coming from, wanting to leave Germany after being there and having such a great time, especially where Willow was learning German so well, and we had a very young baby. But we also thought about how much we grew during that time, like you said, and if we could have a similar experience somewhere else while we have the time to live abroad, then that's what we were going to do. A little side note that's very important to understand is, as a civilian and as a military, there are typically time restrictions with how long you can be overseas before you have to go back. So for those people who haven't heard already, I was on like a 5-year timeline of how many years consecutively I could be overseas before I would have to return. So as we were nearing year 3, we had to come up with a decision if we were going to stay in Germany for longer or if we were going to chance it and take another opportunity. At this point, I was still getting notifications like most people. I think anyone who goes overseas or is looking overseas, even while they're overseas, they continue to have like job notifications to where different locations are for their position. And we were no different. So we had the opportunity, and I applied for a job in Yokosuka, Japan, on mainland. It felt really good. I interviewed, I was offered the position, and we felt like it was the right move for us. As difficult as it was for me, because I was really thriving at that point in Germany, I felt like this would be a great opportunity for my career, but then also for our family.
And I love that you made that distinction, because in my mind, that's how it felt, was like, we can stay here for 5 years the whole time and we know we'd be so happy and we found community, or we can, kind of take the scary risk and stay in 2 places for those 5 years. And so it wasn't necessarily like we can stay in Germany as long as we want and then decide to move, or if we even want to. Like, we knew there was a time change. And so I think that's really what kickstarted that decision, is like, we're like halfway, and before our kids get older and into like school, and we know they're so resilient and adaptable at a young age, let's do it. And honestly, we did the thing that shocked so many of you guys, and that was move, because you could see on YouTube how much we were thriving. And a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Like, you will regret that. But I'm honestly really proud of us for staying true to what we felt like was best.
Yeah, agreed. I think hindsight, it was important for us to make that decision because we were following our intuition, and that will come back and connect in future episodes as we talk about intuition, gut feelings, and really trusting ourselves and giving ourselves more credit than I think most of us do.
So Japan, if we thought Germany was a culture shock, Japan was like an entire 180 immersive cultural experience. It was beautiful. Life was so different in Japan. We're talking super clean streets, quiet trains, quiet everywhere, honestly, other than like the noises of traffic, and just like a very respectful, aware community.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say that even though Germany was like definitely one of the most organized countries that we had ever like lived in, Japan was just on another level. If you've been to Japan, lived in Japan, heard about Japanese lifestyle, it's very respectable, very like take care of your community, take care of your place. that there's just like a lot to learn from. Not to mention the fact that there's different religious beliefs that are more common than Christianity. This was kind of an interesting time for us because in Germany we continue to attend, the local church less frequently because of traveling and because of personal decisions. But, we were still definitely in this phase of like going to like the church that we grew up in. And in Japan, we maybe not initially deliberately, but we eventually found ourselves asking ourselves internally what we were looking for and what we were hoping for. And that's where we quietly made the decision to, stop attending. And so the entire time in Japan, we did not go one Sunday or one activity to, our church. And that was kind of a big step for us.
It was terrifying, to be honest, for me. I remember Easter Sunday in Japan, and it was different. And it was hard, to be honest. And although I didn't physically want to be attending the church that we had grown up with, had known our entire lives, I felt the loss of community, and I felt that loss of like, not celebrating, but yeah, I guess celebrating, being with like-minded people over an important event in a belief system. Yeah, that was hard. So like Tanner said, we did, quite quietly choose to step away from this high demand religion that we've known our entire lives. And we're going to be diving into that. Maybe here we should set a little intention. Like when we talk about religion, our goal is to be the most respectful as we can be. Our goal is to just tell our story, never to persuade, never to like try and, encourage people to change their views. It's just honestly us sharing our stories and our lived experiences. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's important also to clarify that even though we have, obviously we said that we had made this decision at that point to step away. I think it's also important to recognize that because of our different exposures to other religions and religious beliefs, that like that's why it's important to emphasize what Rissa said of we're here to respectively share our experience, but also respect what other people believe, because all in all, that's what we've learned the most of seeing different people's beliefs and different experiences. A lot of it has to do with exactly where you're born. But we'll dive more into that on another episode. It's not going to be something that we share all the time or dive into deeply, but it is also important to recognize that it was something that shaped us and it was our identity for decades.
Yeah, and here we are in Japan, living in a place where Christianity is by like far and wide the minority, like a very small percentage compared to most individuals living in Japan. And that just opened us up to so many different ways of thinking as well. And it was amazing for me to see how the society worked in Japan, a very community-focused mindset. And they lived what seemed to be very happy, peaceful lives. And, they weren't attending a church building worships on Sunday. There seemed to be more of a quiet, go to the shrine before work in the morning and say a prayer, then go on to your day. It was just so different and so eye-opening, and it was a really good thing.
Yeah, I will say that there is just a little smidget, like a little insight of what we experienced. In no way are we trying to say that we are experts on any of the religious beliefs, especially for those in Japan. We experienced a lot of temples and shrines, but we just got a little insight. And it was eye-opening, like Rissa said, to really see and feel like the difference between what we grew up with.
And as you said, temple, I just thought about too how we would drive around in Japan, go on, little trips, as you guys can see on YouTube, and Willa looking out the window, look, there's a temple, and it having a completely different meaning to her as it has to us our whole lives, and just like smiling in our head and being like, you know what, these are the moments that make like living abroad and just like reflecting back, like we're proud because a lot of the reasons of why we have made these changes is for our girls. Like they've been at the forefront in our minds with them. So just kind of a little story that I just have to smile, and it makes us feel proud.
Yeah. Moving on quite quickly, honestly, is our time ending in Japan, which was a surprise for us, for almost everybody involved, including family. Our intentions were to go to Japan, like we said before, for about 3 years, roughly 3 years that we were going to split our time there, 2.5 years. And that's when I got a very influential email from a coworker who was actually living in Italy at the time. I had worked with him before when I was in Germany, part of a inter-European team. And he told me that he was, headed back to the States, that his position was going to be opening up. And previous conversations I had told him before we knew about Japan, I told him, I was like, I would love the opportunity, years down the road if Italy's available. Anyway, that kick-started off a conversation with my boss, my current boss now, and the one that I was working with in Germany, to say, hey, is this even an opportunity to come back? And to provide a little context, we were enjoying our time in Japan, but it was definitely an adjustment for all of us. We were not enjoying it quite as much as we had hoped. Work was a little bit different than what I had expected. And when this opportunity came up, we looked at each other, we talked about what it would look like for us. And ultimately, once we found out that we would be able to extend past the 5 years, that was a pretty easy decision at that point, because then we would have longer than 2.5 years, coming back to Europe. Again, as crazy as it sounds, just, 8-9 months earlier, we'd made the decision to leave Europe. We started to get the ball rolling again to come back to Europe, where we are now, sitting in our house in Italy.
When we heard Italy, I mean, this is like what dreams are made up of, honestly, is like living in Italy. Not very many people get to do that, at least not a lot of foreigners. I feel like there's limited US bases here. So even just logistically, if you're going to be living abroad on a US base, it likely is not going to be in Italy. They're smaller and they're not as common compared to other European countries. Yeah, it kind of is like a bucket list destination. Even I feel like Americans in general love Italy. Italy has been unexpected and I think really good for our family.
And that's where you'll find us now. We're sitting in our living room sweating, if you can't tell. It is hot the day that we're recording this. And since it's our first episode, we don't have any fans on either. So we're just trying to make sure that everything sounds okay. But life in Italy has been something else for us. As you mentioned before, we loved our experience in Italy. We had talked about it before, and it felt like a really great opportunity for us to come here.
Life here is so different. It's chaotic, but in a beautiful way. I love to see people talking to each other in lines at the supermarket. That was definitely different coming from Japan. That was one of the first culture shocks is, wow, it's so lively and just so loud, to be honest. In Japan, people would it was so cute. People would stretch in the supermarket lines, but they were pretty silent, just doing their stretches. And then here in Italy, though, they're friendly and they're talking. And it's just life here is very different. And we love the food. I mean, who doesn't love Italian food? And one thing is that we're all learning Italian faster than we would have expected. Except for Tanner, we expected him to learn the language since he caught on to German very fast. And I mean, because we knew we were moving to Italy, we didn't give Japanese a ton of our time. Although Willa did do pretty well because she went to Japanese Yochin, which we'll talk about later. But one thing that moving here to Italy has just solidified for us, we knew it before, but home is not a location. For us, it's not a place, honestly. Home is wherever our family is. I know this sounds cheesy, but it's really true. Home is just being with each other, and we make it our home.
It is cheesy, but it means enough to us that we both got matching tattoos on our ribs to remind each other that home is each other. It's with each other.
Oh, no, I love it. But all in all, you guys, it's really fun to reflect with you guys. It's fun to reminisce together. I feel like we're oftentimes talking about our dreams and our goals and what's to come. But this time we're looking back, and it's just fun to see how our worldview, our marriage perspective, all of it has changed and how it's shaped us.
And here's a cheesy line for you. It's the change is not just about changing our address, but honestly, it's changed so much about our perspective of life, about family, about what can be important for so many other people. And it fully depends on just what you prioritize. And also respecting other people's, different beliefs, because what we believe and what we feel is most important for us is not the same answer for everyone else. And we're talking about right now, home is with each other. It's not like a location. I know for sure so many people is no, home is who I'm with and where I am, because it just means so much to them. And I think at one point that was our definition as well, but it definitely has changed over the last few years.
But for those of you listening here, I think we should make it known that we don't feel like people have to move abroad to have these internal changes. We were actually talking to our German friends just a couple days ago, and they were asking us if we felt like all of these changes that we've had have came because of our time in Europe and Asia. And when they asked that, I was like, yeah, like for sure they've shaped us. And then as we got talking, they're like, or it was a great perspective. They were like, or what if it was your willingness and desire to say yes to those opportunities that just changed it all? And I was like, that for one makes me feel good. But for two, I think that's accurate. Like, you don't physically have to change to have these internal changes. I think I repeated that twice, but it is worth repeating. I think people just have to be willing to step into those uncomfortable situations where growth happens, have those hard conversations, think outside the box, talk to people with differences. You know, if you're putting yourself in these situations, the change internally is often a natural consequence and not a natural effect.
And believe us, we have had a lot of hard conversations, those difficult conversations that you don't really want to talk about, but once you like kind of open up the can per se, you like almost have to have it. So it's been such an interesting ride to experience the different phases of like exploration and the different phases of just like personal identity. And a lot of that has been because we've been putting ourselves in these situations. Even though we didn't know where we were going to be moving, we were open to the idea of moving. And I think that makes a lot of the difference.
Okay, well, that was, I feel like, a good first episode.
Yeah, great job.
You too. Stay tuned for next week. Actually, it's going to be in the next 2 weeks. As you guys know, we have a YouTube channel, and we've decided to stick with our content that we were previously uploading on YouTube for 1 week and then do a podcast every other week. So it's going to be uploaded in 2 weeks, and we're going to be really deep diving into our life in Utah. This is the never before seen, so I think it's going to be really fun.
Be sure to give us a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast, and to like and leave a comment below in the comments. If you have any questions, any ideas for future episodes, we have several lined up already, but we're open to answering any questions along the way. So please be sure to do that.
Thank you again for listening to A Piece of Our Story. We hope it reminds you that your story matters too.